Hello, it's Sunday, January 12th, 2020. Welcome to another episode of Student of the Last Days. I'm going to just cover a couple of things. I'm going to try to not make a habit of this, but I've been thinking a little bit about my recommendations of an authorized version of the King James and a Strong's Concordance. And I thought, well, what about my brothers and sisters that it's going to put them in a bind to try to spend money right now? I know I've had my share of tough times, and there's sometimes it's painful when there's something you know you need and you just can't. It's just not in the budget. So I did a little bit of research, and I found something that it's quite useful for me. I'm on the road a lot. My work requires it. I spend an awful lot of time in my vehicle, and I find it helpful. I've been using it for a few days now, and I think many of you might find it useful. Almost all of us have cell phones now. I'm recording this podcast on a cell phone, and I want to apologize. The introductory episode, the sound quality wasn't that great. I've learned you got to hold the phone a little bit closer to the mouth for it to be clear. So that introductory episode didn't come across so good. I apologize for that. Anyway, today's recommendation. It's a cell phone app. It's both Android and Google, so it should cover 95% of us. Maybe a little more than 95%. And it's called Bible with Strong's Concordance. And it's highly rated. At the time when I downloaded it a few days ago, it only had one negative comment or review. And that was something about that it wasn't user-friendly. Other than that, it's 4 and 5 stars across the board. Everybody seems to love it, and I now see why. And I strongly recommend, if you don't already have it, it's pretty popular, it looks like. Over 10,000 people are active installs. That's pretty good. And sometimes it feels like nobody, you feel like the Lone Ranger, there's just doesn't seem like there's many like-minded people. But then when I seen that, just over 10,000, for this one Bible app, there's probably more Bible students out there than I think. I found that encouraging. Anyway, if I make an off-the-cuff reference, like I probably will in this podcast, I'm coming into it a little. The Spirit moved, and I felt like I should record this one. But I may not have exact locations today, not even book and chapter like I normally give you. But with this app, it'll make it so easy. You can take one word. Say, I'm going to give you an N sample, which is an older English word. In modern English, we would say example. God said He give us similitudes and ensamples. Now, if I make let's say I make a statement like that, like I just did, and it's a fact, by the way, God did say that, you'll be able to check me out really quickly. You'll be able to open up that app, Bible with Strong's Concordance. You'll be able to type in ensample, or you could type in similitude. Just pick a word that's probably not going to be used a whole lot throughout the Bible, probably only a few times. Plug in similitudes, and very quickly it'll come up, and you'll see the scriptures that I'm referring to. Very often, God gives us more than one witness. He'll give us 2, if it's really important, 3 or more witnesses to the same fact that He wants us to know about. So, I recommend, I hope you will, download the app. That way you have it with you. We tend to have our phones with us all the time, don't we? I try not to be glued to mine, but I run an app for work, so whether I like it or not, I have my phone a lot. I try to keep safety in mind and not get preoccupied with it when I'm driving down the road. By the way, if you're wondering, I'm parked right now. I'm sitting in a parking lot. I'm not trying to do this while I'm driving down the road. Thank you for your concern. So anyway, but not only does it pop the verse up, it will have your important words that are worth looking up with the Strong's Lexicon right there. One tap of your finger and the dictionary comes right up and you can get the deeper meaning that God wants you to know. I'll give you an example of one yesterday. I was looking in Jeremiah chapter 51, and it's talking about the judgment of Babylon. And in verse 7 there, it talked about the golden cup. Say, yep, that golden cup, the one mentioned in Revelation, it's got the whore with it. The whore drinking out of the golden cup, remember? Well, that same golden cup, and I seen that where it had the H, and I forget what number it was. But it had it right there, and I clicked on it, and it came up. And yeah, it means cup, but it has a deeper meaning than that, including an unclean bird, and Dr. Strong's had probably an owl. And man, did that click, because my son, who is just turned 29, that's my baby, that's our youngest one. Grandson's 12 now, but our son's 29. And he had mentioned that the owl was pretty prominent in our adversarial people, the occultists, that, they're mentioned pretty frequently in the Bible, aren't they? They're connected with witchcraft and sorceries and that sort of thing. Observers of time. That adversarial religion, Mystery Babylon, the Bible calls it, which is that wide path Christ taught us about. There's a lot of different ways to get pulled in, including sometimes secret societies will pull you in to that religion, Mystery Babylon. The owl is prominent in that. Well, it shouldn't surprise me. It's part of the cup of abominations. That's kind of my thought for the day. How important that Strong's Concordance is, so that we can go back to the Hebrew, back to the Greek, and even some of it's in Chaldee, which was Daniel was in captivity. The first several chapters of the book of Daniel was written in the Chaldee. Well, that's in the Hebrew dictionary, that part of it. Dr. Strong's did a good work in that as well. Anyway, it's free. I'm happy I took the time to find it, and so I can share it with you. So there's a solution for you if you want to follow along with me, study, and then there's going to be times like today where I make references that, I off the cuff like this right now, I'm not sure exactly which book. I know it's mentioned in both the Old and New Testament. I'm pretty sure it was Paul taught that a similitude, some people call them types, it means similar. It doesn't mean exact. In other words, something happened in ancient times, and it's going to play out again in the last days. Okay, we was going to have one special generation this generation is going teachings of Christ. It's going to endure tribulation like no generation before it, and there will be none after. We're going to go through this one time, and if you're living on the earth at the time of the tribulation, you're going to go through it. You're not flying away. I'm sorry. We talked about that in a prior. We have work to do. We talked about that in a prior podcast. We have work to do. In the delivering up spoken of in Mark 13, Luke 21, Matthew 24. How are we going to be delivered up to testify so that the final end can come? We're going to testify. And it's not us that speak, but the Holy Spirit. We don't even take a thought beforehand, Christ taught us. How can we do that if we're not here? Ponder that one. Another thought for the day there. I've gave you a couple of things to chew on today. And that's good. We will get in a deeper study. Biblical typology is a fascinating field of study. It's where those similitudes and examples God teaches us with, where something happened in ancient time. Let's take the Assyrian and Babylonian captivities. They're fascinating, and then this is going to play out again. Will it be exactly like it happened the first time? No. That's why we call it a type, or that's why we call it a similitude, but it's going to be similar. And in end-time events now, our attention, just very recently, just in the last few days, have been called once again to Babylon. What was once, don't let the names confuse you, Iraq and Iran. Iraq is Babylon, Iran is Persia. So when you're reading the Bible, keep that in mind. That's Iraq and Iran. We had a bloodthirsty terrorist murderer got taken out by a drone recently. And it happened right there in Babylon. Baghdad is in Babylon, calling our attention to that region. The guy was a Persian. The terrorist is a Persian, but he was in Babylon. It definitely calls our attention to those two countries from ancient times. Do you know there was a conflict in ancient times between Persia and Babylon that resulted in the children of Judah being, and there were quite a few Benjamites too. Remember, the other 10 tribes had already been taken captive by the northern Babylon, which was Assyria. They, 150 or a couple hundred years prior to the Babylonian captivity, they had already been taken captive and released by the time that the Babylonian captivity happens. But that type, the Persian, that was the second captivity of the rest of the house of Israel, Judah and Benjamin. And they wound up in Babylon. And then there was a conflict between Persia and Babylon, and it involved a king named Cyrus, whom God anointed and ordained, named him approximately 100 years before he was born. And he came to power, defeated Babylon, and the net result was the children got to go home and the temple got rebuilt. Brothers and sisters, it's getting ready to happen again. This time, though, there's a common teaching that the Jews must rebuild the third temple before the appearance of Antichrist. That is indeed a false teaching. Okay, I will dig it out, and I will do a second part of this podcast about biblical typologies, and this time I'm going to give you books and chapters, which book it's in, which chapter to read, to document these things. But Christ builds the third temple. No one else. Man doesn't do it. Now, I'm not saying that it's out of the realm of possibility that there's some kind of, I'm struggling for the right word, but not the millennial temple, not the third and final temple. They might build a structure, that's the word I'm looking for, but it's not going to be the biblical one, because Christ himself builds that, and I can document that. Zechariah is the book. It just came to me. I'm pretty sure it's out toward the end, chapter 12, if I remember right. Now, keep in mind, I'm shooting from the hip here, so don't take it as gospel, but Zechariah, I think read Zechariah chapter 12 and see what you come up with. And if I'm wrong, I will correct myself in the next podcast. Christ builds the third temple, known as the sanctuary. It's going to be the one that he reigns from during the millennium. And he himself builds it, not the Jews. I know it talks about the holy place. It's often assumed that that must be the temple. It does not must be. It could be the western wall. In fact, the two witnesses are struck down, and this is where your Strong's is going to come in really handy. You will find out it's an open area. Kind of describes the western wall. Doing a little study in there in Revelation, in the Greek dictionary of Dr. Strong's, we will find out when you're reading about the two witnesses being struck down. Remember, and they send each other gifts. They're so happy because those two guys plagued the earth. Kind of like the times of Moses when there was the 10 plagues. Happens again. That was a type. It happened. It is a historic, I should include the word historical, a historical type, a prior event that happened in history that's going to happen again. The plagues are going to return during the time of the two witnesses. They're written. And it's pretty troublesome to Antichrist because, well, it might help some children wake up and realize that he's not Jesus. He's the instead of Jesus, which is another thing to look up. Look up that word anti in the Strong's and see what it means. Look it up. It will help you greatly understand an instead of Christ. Not the Christ, instead of. And then, man, this is wonderful because then you can connect to, in the book of Job, when Elihu showed up before God came down. Before God came down, Elihu showed up. And you know what he said I'm going to do? I'm going to speak to you in the stead of God. He was a type for Antichrist. He comes first, and he spoke in the stead of God. That's what Antichrist is going to do. Many people will think he is God. He's going to exalt himself above everything that is God's, and in fact show himself to be God. 2 Thessalonians, among other places. It's going to happen, brothers and sisters. And there's a pretty fair chance, if the good Lord's willing and we live long enough, we're going to live to see it. It's going to happen in this generation. And we're getting out toward the end of this generation, and I will continue to document that as we go along. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. I can't thank you enough. And I'm going to wrap it up for this one. Next episode, stay tuned. I will bring you further documentation. I'll bring it home for you a little bit more. Remember, this is a step-by-step process. I appreciate your patience, your kindness, your love, your support. If you know anyone, I do not have a budget to advertise this podcast. I think I have the wherewithal to get it on Roku soon. Right now, just Podomatic. I'm going to try to launch a Roku channel. That's going to be about it for my means. Word of mouth could go a long way in helping. So if you know someone that you feel could benefit from it, please tell them. And likewise yourself. I'll get the site at Bible.welcomehome777.com. And by the way, the welcome home, you ever wonder why welcome home? We're going to talk more about the master plan of God. What's his intentions? He's going to gather us back to the Zion region. Wait a minute, I thought, Pat, I thought Zionism was evil. I know. Depends on which side of the fence you're standing on, God's or the adversarial side. Zion is evil to the adversaries. That idea of the children gathering back to Zion, to them it's bad. To us it's good. That's the plan of God, to gather us back. Welcome home. 777, why did I put that in there? At the seventh trump, the seventh vial, and the seventh seal. The gathering back will begin then. Christ and the angels are returning, his angels. Not the adversarial angels, his angels. I look forward to that day. We're going home. Welcome home, 777. Bible.welcomehome777.com. More information, A contact form will be there. Got any questions, comments, concerns? I do not cast pearls before swine, so if you come at me viciously, you will not be hearing from me. Okay? I'm not going to entertain that. But my brothers and sisters that love God, love Christ, the Anointed One. By the way, that's what Christ means. You probably knew that. The anointed of God. The two witnesses are also called in the Old Testament the two sons of oil. They're anointed as well. I love you, brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's valuable, and I thank you for investing in this podcast. Investment in the form of your time. Thank you. Bye-bye.